It started with an unexpected text on a Thursday afternoon, a receipt from a luxury hotel in downtown Chicago. The sender? My wife, Jenna. Except she wasn't supposed to be in Chicago. When I called her, her voice was steady, her excuses rehearsed. But something was off. That gnawing intuition I had ignored for months flared up like a siren. Over the next few days, I pieced together enough evidence to confirm my worst fear. Jenna wasn't on a business trip. She was on a secret getaway, with someone else. My heartbreak turned to resolve. I planned my response meticulously. Jenna thought she could fool me, but the surprise I had in store for her would be unforgettable and final. The email landed in my inbox at 4:38 p.m. on a dull Tuesday, an unwelcome jolt in the monotony of my day. Reservation confirmation for 2. The Fairmont Chicago Millennium Park. My first instinct was confusion. Jenna wasn't supposed to be anywhere near Chicago. She'd left that morning for a work retreat in Lake Geneva, a quiet Wisconsin town 3 hours away. I stared at the email, its tidy little details mocking me. Dinner for 2 at 7 p.m. A suite booked until Friday. My stomach nodded, but I told myself there had to be an explanation. When Jenna called that evening, her voice was calm, light, as though nothing had changed. Long day, she said. We're getting a ton of team-building stuff crammed in. I'll probably crash early. I didn't ask her about Chicago. I didn't ask her about the reservation. I just let her talk, my gut churning with unease. When the call ended, I paced the kitchen, the email glowing ominously from my phone screen. I needed proof, real proof, before jumping to conclusions. So I dug. First, I called the hotel in Lake Geneva, pretending to be Jenna's assistant. I'm just confirming her stay, I said, my voice steady, rehearsed. But their records didn't show anyone under her name. I thanked the clerk, hung up, and stared at the wall, the knot in my stomach tightening. I spent hours debating my next move. Part of me wanted to confront her immediately, to demand answers. But something told me that if Jenna was lying, she wouldn't break easily. I needed to see it for myself. I booked a flight to Chicago for Wednesday morning, called in sick to work, and packed a bag. That night, I didn't sleep. My mind replayed every subtle oddity over the past few months. Her guarded phone, the late-night work calls, the way she avoided eye contact when we talked about the future. The signs had been there, but I hadn't wanted to see them. The next day, I landed in Chicago and went straight to the Fairmont. The receptionist confirmed the reservation without hesitation. Yes, Mrs. Coleman is in room 1207. Would you like me to call up? No, I said quickly, masking my shock. I'll handle it later. Instead, I sat in the lobby, nursing a coffee that went cold as I stared at the elevator bank. Hours passed. Jenna finally appeared around 6 p.m., descending in the elevator with a man I recognized, Eric, one of her colleagues. They were laughing, standing too close. When his hand brushed her back, and she didn't move away, something inside me snapped. I followed them outside, staying far enough behind that they wouldn't notice. They hailed a cab and disappeared into the bustling city. I didn't chase them. Instead, I walked back to the hotel, pulled out my phone, and called a lawyer. The divorce papers were filed within 2 days. Jenna didn't know what was coming. I stayed silent when she called to check in, pretending everything was fine. Her lies tasted bitter now, but I let them slide, waiting for the right moment. I had a plan. By Friday morning, I was sitting in the Fairmont lobby again, this time with an envelope in my pocket. My private investigator had done his job well. Photos of Jenna and Eric at a rooftop bar, sharing a kiss. Records of the dinner reservation. Copies of text messages, carefully timed rendezvous over the last 6 months. When she stepped out of the elevator at noon, suitcase in hand, I approached her. Jenna, I said. Her face froze, then melted into confusion, then panic. Mark, what are you doing here? I could ask you the same thing. I held up the envelope. Let's talk. We didn't talk in the lobby. Instead, she followed me outside, her face pale, her hands shaking. When we reached a quiet park bench, I handed her the papers. You want to explain this? I asked, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. Jenna stared at the envelope, her mouth opening and closing as though the words wouldn't come. Finally, she said, "It's not what you think." "Don't," I said, cutting her off. "Don't insult me by lying. I have pictures, Jenna. I have texts. This wasn't a one-time thing." She exhaled sharply, her hands gripping the envelope like a lifeline. "I was going to tell you," she said softly. "I just didn't know how." "Tell me what? That you've been cheating on me for months? That every business trip was just an excuse to screw around with Eric?" Her voice cracked. "It's not just about Eric." That stopped me cold. I stared at her, the anger momentarily eclipsed by confusion. "What are you talking about?" She looked away, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "There's something else you need to know. About Lily." Hearing our daughter's name felt like a punch to the gut. "What about Lily?" Her eyes welled up, but she didn't look at me. She's not biologically yours. Or mine." The words didn't register at first. It felt like she'd spoken in a foreign language, something I couldn't comprehend. "What are you saying?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Jenna finally met my eyes, her expression shattered. "There was a mix-up at the hospital. I found out a few months ago. Lily isn't. She's not our child." The world tilted. My breath came in shallow gasps as I tried to make sense of her words. "You knew," I said. "You knew, and you didn't tell me?" "I couldn't," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't know how. And then Eric found out. He was there for me, Mark. I didn't plan any of this." I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. "You didn't plan it? Jenna, you've been lying to me for months. About Eric. About Lily. What else are you hiding?" "Nothing," she said, her voice breaking. "Mark, please, you have to understand. I don't have to do anything," I said, standing up. "You've destroyed everything, Jenna. I'll do whatever it takes to protect Lily, no matter what some DNA test says." As I walked away, her sobs echoed behind me. But I didn't look back. Couldn't. Not yet. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake in my hotel room, staring at the ceiling, Jenna's words playing on a loop in my head. Lily isn't biologically ours. Every memory of her, her first steps, her first word, her shy laugh as she hid behind her telescope, felt tainted. Was any of it real? Did it even matter? She was my daughter. I couldn't imagine life without her. But now there was another family out there. A family that might have my biological child. A family that had been living their own version of this nightmare without even knowing it. By morning, I had made up my mind. I wasn't going to let Jenna's betrayal define what happened next. Lily was my priority, and I would do whatever it took to protect her. I called my lawyer as soon as the clock hit 9 a.m. "We need to discuss custody," I said, my voice steady despite the whirlwind inside me. "No matter what happens, I want to ensure Lily stays with me." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Mark, if Lily isn't biologically yours, that complicates things. The court might consider the rights of the biological parents if they become involved." "They won't," I said quickly, though I had no way of knowing that. "This doesn't change anything. She's my daughter." "Understood. But tread carefully," he said. "If this gets messy, the truth could put your custody claim at risk. Have you considered how you'll handle this?" I hung up without answering. The truth was, I didn't have a plan. I just knew that Lily needed stability. What I didn't expect was Jenna's next move. She showed up at my office 3 days later. I hadn't spoken to her since Chicago, hadn't returned her calls or texts. Seeing her there, standing in the lobby with her face pale and drawn, filled me with equal parts anger and dread. "I can't do this here," I muttered, motioning her to follow me to a nearby coffee shop. The walk was silent, tension crackling in the air between us. Once we sat down, she spoke first. "Mark, I've contacted the hospital." I froze. "What do you mean?" I told them what happened, about the mix-up. They're reviewing their records to identify the other family. Her voice trembled, but her eyes met mine. "We need to know who they are." We owe it to Lily, and to the other child. Her words felt like a slap. You think dragging another family into this is going to fix things? Do you have any idea what this will do to Lily? She has a right to know the truth. Jenna snapped, her voice rising. And so does the other family. What if they're struggling? What if they've been wondering all this time why their daughter doesn't look like them? She's 8, Jenna. She doesn't need her entire world turned upside down. And what about us? She countered, her voice breaking. We've been living a lie, Mark. I've been living with this secret, trying to protect you. Protect her. But we can't keep pretending nothing happened. I shook my head, my fists clenched under the table. This isn't about protecting Lily. This is about easing your guilt. That's not fair, she said, tears brimming in her eyes. I made mistakes, yes, but this isn't just about me. It's about doing what's right. I didn't respond. Couldn't. Part of me hated her for involving the hospital without talking to me first. But another part of me, the part one didn't want to acknowledge, wondered if she was right. 2 weeks later, the hospital contacted us. They had found the other family, a couple named James and Rachel Moore, who lived 2 hours away in Michigan. Their daughter, Emma, was born on the same day as Lily in the same hospital. They had no idea a mix-up had occurred. The first time I saw the Moores was at a park halfway between our towns. Jenna had arranged the meeting, and I had reluctantly agreed. Rachel and James were polite but clearly shaken, their faces pale as they clutched Emma's hands. I couldn't stop staring at the little girl. Her auburn hair and green eyes were nothing like Lily's dark curls and brown eyes, but something about her felt familiar. It was a gut-wrenching reminder of what had been stolen from all of us. James spoke first. We've gone over this 100 times, and we still don't know how to process it. It's unimaginable. Rachel nodded, her voice trembling. We don't even know what to say. What do we do now? I looked at Jenna, silently daring her to answer. She had pushed for this meeting, after all. But to my surprise, she hesitated, her confidence faltering. I don't know, she admitted. But we thought. You deserve to know. For the girl's sake. Rachel glanced at Emma, who was watching us with wide, curious eyes. Does Lily know? Not yet, I said quickly. We wanted to wait until we had more answers. James frowned. More answers? Like what? Like how we move forward, I said, my voice sharper than I intended. This isn't just about DNA. It's about what's best for the kids. The conversation went in circles for hours, filled with half-formed plans and raw emotions. By the end of it, we agreed on one thing. The girls needed to meet. They deserved to know each other, even if the rest of us were still figuring things out. The meeting was set for the following weekend at a neutral location, a family-friendly cafe with a playground. Lily was quiet when we told her, her eyes darting between Jenna and me. I don't understand, she said finally. Why do I have to meet them? Because they're special, Jenna said, her voice gentle. Just like you. Lily's gaze lingered on me, searching for reassurance. Do you want me to go? I think it's important, I said carefully. But it's your choice. She nodded slowly, her small hands fidgeting in her lap. Okay, I'll go. That Saturday, we arrived at the cafe to find the Moores already waiting. Emma stood beside Rachel, her shy smile a mirror of Lily's. The girls stared at each other for a long moment before Emma stepped forward. Hi, she said softly. I'm Emma. Hi, Lily replied, her voice equally timid. I'm Lily. They didn't say much after that. Instead, they ran off to the playground, their laughter echoing across the cafe patio. Watching them together was surreal. They were strangers, yet there was an unmistakable connection between them, a shared energy that felt both beautiful and heartbreaking. As the girls played, James turned to me. This isn't going to be easy, is it? No, I said quietly. It's not. But we'll figure it out, he said, though his voice wavered with uncertainty. I nodded, though I wasn't sure I believed it. The weeks that followed were a balancing act, a fragile dance between two families trying to make sense of a reality none of us had asked for. Jenna and Rachel exchanged hesitant phone calls, coordinating playdates for Lily and Emma. The girls warmed to each other quickly, their bond a bright spot in the chaos. But for the adults, every interaction was fraught with tension. The unspoken question hung over us all. What comes next? Jenna was the first to propose something bold. Over coffee at a park one morning, she turned to me and said, "Mark, I've been thinking. Maybe the girls need more than these visits. Maybe we need to consider something long-term." I stiffened, setting my mug down. "What are you suggesting?" "They deserve to grow up knowing each other," she said, her voice soft but determined. "I think we should share custody." The words hit me like a physical blow. "Share custody?" I repeated, incredulous. "Jenna, they're not pets. They have homes, lives. You can't just uproot everything." "I know it sounds crazy," she admitted, "but think about it. What if this isn't about choosing one family over the other? What if it's about finding a way to coexist?" Her words lingered long after that conversation. The idea was wild, unthinkable, but it also made an unsettling kind of sense. The Moores must have been grappling with the same thought because, a week later, James called me with a similar proposal. "We've been talking," he said, his tone cautious. "Rachel and I think it might be good for the girls to spend more time together. Maybe even alternating weekends." I pinched the bridge of my nose, feeling the weight of it all press down on me. "This isn't just about the girls," I said. "What about the impact on the rest of us? On their sense of stability?" James sighed. "I don't know. But stability doesn't mean pretending this didn't happen." I didn't answer, torn between my instincts to protect Lily and the gnawing fear that James was right. For weeks, Jenna, the Moores, and I debated logistics, boundaries, and potential pitfalls. Every conversation ended in frustration or stalemate. But through it all, Lily and Emma continued to thrive. Their laughter, their growing friendship, it was impossible to ignore. Eventually, we reached a tentative agreement. The girls would split time between the two families. Lily would spend alternating weekends with the Moores, while Emma did the same with us. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. The first weekend was a disaster. Lily clung to me at the door of the Moores' house, her tearful protests cutting into my resolve. "I don't want to go," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I know," I said, kneeling to meet her gaze. "But it's just 2 days. You'll have fun, I promise." Her lip quivered, but she nodded reluctantly. Rachel greeted her with a warm smile, but I could see the anxiety behind her eyes. Watching Lily walk into their home felt like a piece of me was being torn away. When Emma arrived at our house that same evening, the tension was just as thick. She was polite, even sweet, but her discomfort was evident. She lingered close to Jenna, wary of the unfamiliarity. By bedtime, Jenna was in tears, muttering, "What have we done?" as I tried to reassure her. But slowly, things began to change. The second visit was easier, and by the third, both girls were giggling as they exchanged stories about their weekends. Their resilience was humbling. They adapted in ways that the rest of us struggled to match. It wasn't all smooth sailing. Jenna and Rachel clashed frequently, each fiercely protective of her role as a mother. James and I had our share of arguments too, often over minor details that felt monumental in the moment. The stress of coordination took its toll on all of us, but no one wanted to be the one to give up. The twist came 6 months later, during what was supposed to be a routine dinner at the Moores' house. We'd started these shared meals as a way to keep communication open, though they were often awkward affairs. That night, Emma was unusually quiet, picking at her food while Lily chatted away. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" Rachel finally asked. Emma looked up, her green eyes glistening. "I don't like going back and forth," she said softly. "I just want to be with Lily. All the time." The room fell silent. Jenna reached for my hand under the table, her grip tight. James cleared his throat, glancing at me uncertainly. "Emma," Rachel began gently, "we're doing this so you and Lily can be together. Isn't that what you want?" "Yes," Emma said, her voice breaking. "But I don't want to keep leaving. Why can't we all just live together?" The question hung in the air, innocent but heavy with implications. James and Rachel exchanged a stunned look, while Jenna's grip on my hand tightened. I didn't know whether to laugh at the absurdity or cry at the simplicity of her logic. After the girls went to bed, the four of us sat in the living room, the air thick with unspoken thoughts. Finally, James broke the silence. "She has a point," he said quietly. "Maybe we've been looking at this all wrong." Rachel shook her head. "James, we can't. What are you even suggesting?" "I'm not suggesting anything yet," he said. "But maybe it's time we think outside the box." The conversation that followed was long, emotional, and filled with uncertainty. Could two families, so different and yet so connected, truly live as one? It seemed impossible. But as we talked, the idea began to take shape. A month later, we found a house. A sprawling property with enough space for two separate living areas and shared common spaces. It was unconventional, to say the least. Friends and relatives were skeptical, some outright critical. But we were united by a shared goal: giving the girls the best life we could. The transition wasn't easy. There were arguments over boundaries, over shared responsibilities, over everything from groceries to parenting styles. But there were also moments of connection. Movie nights where we all laughed until we cried, holidays filled with warmth and chaos, and quiet evenings when it felt like we'd created something extraordinary. Over time, the tensions eased. The girls flourished, their bond growing stronger with each passing day. And slowly, we began to find a rhythm. We weren't one family, not exactly, but we weren't two separate ones either. We were something new, something imperfect but meaningful. One night, as I watched Lily and Emma giggle over a board game, I felt a pang of gratitude. The road had been messy, painful, and uncertain. But as I looked around the room, I realized that we'd built something worth fighting for. Something that felt, in its own way, like home.